There's a moment in every public downfall where the crowd turns. One day, you're celebrated. The next, you're erased. And the strangest part? The people destroying you are often the same ones who built you up. This isn't random chaos. It's a psychological pattern, one that's been repeating for centuries, long before social media gave it a name. Today, we're going to decode exactly how cancel culture transforms heroes into villains, and why this cycle is almost impossible to escape once it begins. Cancel culture feels modern. It feels like a product of Twitter threads and Instagram callouts. But the mechanism behind it is ancient. What we're witnessing isn't new technology creating new behavior. It's new technology revealing patterns that have always existed in human psychology. The rise and fall of public figures follows a script so predictable you could almost set your watch by it. This matters because most people believe they're immune. They think, I would never participate in a mob. But the data on human behavior tells a different story. Studies in social psychology show that ordinary people, under specific conditions, will engage in collective punishment without even recognizing they're doing it. The pattern operates below conscious awareness, driven by emotional triggers and cognitive biases that evolved over millennia. And here's what makes this particularly unsettling. The pattern doesn't just destroy the target. It transforms the participants. Every person who joins the cycle, even passively, becomes part of a behavioral loop that reshapes how they perceive morality, justice, and their own identity. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just why heroes become villains, but why you might be participating in the pattern without realizing it. The cycle of cancellation follows 5 distinct stages. Each stage builds on the previous one, creating momentum that becomes nearly impossible to stop. Let's walk through them. Stage 1. The elevation. Before someone can fall, they must first be raised. This is the critical foundation most people miss. Cancel culture doesn't begin with the cancellation, it begins with the creation of the hero. In this stage, a person is elevated beyond their humanity. They become a symbol, a brand, an ideological vessel that represents something larger than themselves. The psychological mechanism here is called idealization. When we idealize someone, we unconsciously project our own values, hopes, and unmet needs onto them. We're not actually seeing the person, we're seeing a mirror of what we want to believe exists in the world. Research in parasocial relationships shows that people form emotional bonds with public figures that mimic real relationships, complete with expectations, loyalty, and a need for consistency. Here's a real example. Think of any celebrity who built their brand on authenticity or moral clarity. Maybe they spoke out about social justice, environmental causes, or personal integrity. Their audience didn't just enjoy their work, they identified with them. The person became proof that good people exist, that change is possible, that taking a stand matters. But there's a hidden trap in this elevation. The higher the pedestal, the more fragile it becomes. Because idealization is always unstable. It's not based on reality, it's based on emotional need. And emotional needs shift. Stage 2. The crack. Every pattern needs a trigger. In this stage, something emerges. A past tweet, a questionable decision, an allegation, a moment of hypocrisy. The specific content almost doesn't matter. What matters is that it contradicts the idealized image. This is where a cognitive bias called the halo effect reverses itself. When we idealize someone, we see everything they do through a positive lens. But the moment that lens shatters, we experience what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort of holding 2 contradictory beliefs simultaneously. The brain hates cognitive dissonance. It's neurologically uncomfortable, so the mind resolves it quickly, often by swinging to the opposite extreme. If the person was once a hero, they must now be a villain. There's no middle ground because the middle ground doesn't resolve the emotional discomfort. Consider someone who built their career on being an ally to marginalized communities, then gets accused of behavior that contradicts that image. The audience doesn't just feel disappointed, they feel betrayed. And betrayal activates some of the deepest emotional responses in human psychology, rooted in our evolutionary need for trustworthy group members. Betrayal by someone we admired feels personal, even when we've never met them. Stage 3. The permission. This is the most dangerous stage, and it happens with stunning speed. Once the crack appears, something shifts in the collective consciousness. Suddenly, it becomes socially acceptable, even morally righteous, to attack. The psychological pattern here is called moral licensing. Because the person has been framed as bad, any action taken against them feels justified. In fact, it feels like justice. Studies on mob behavior show that when individuals believe they're acting in service of a moral cause, they suspend their normal ethical restraints. The usual empathy circuits in the brain quiet down. Cruelty stops feeling like cruelty, it feels like accountability. Social media accelerates this stage exponentially. Platforms are designed to reward emotional engagement, and outrage is the most engaging emotion. Algorithms prioritize content that triggers strong reactions, which means cancel campaigns spread faster than almost any other type of information. Research into virality patterns shows that morally charged content, especially content that allows people to signal their own virtue by condemning others, achieves maximum reach. Here's where it gets even darker. Many people participating in this stage aren't even angry. They're afraid. They're afraid of being associated with the wrong person, of being on the wrong side, of becoming the next target. So they join the pile-on as a form of social self-preservation. This is defensive aggression masquerading as moral conviction. Stage 4. The dehumanization. Once permission is granted, the language changes. The person stops being referred to as a complex human being. They become a label, a monster, a representation of everything wrong with society. This is textbook dehumanization, a process studied extensively in conflict psychology. When we dehumanize someone, we unconsciously remove them from our circle of moral concern. Brain imaging studies show that when people view others as less than human, the regions associated with empathy and social cognition show decreased activity. The person becomes an object, a problem to be solved, a stain to be removed. The language of cancellation reflects this perfectly. People don't say, "This person made a mistake." They say, "This person is toxic. This person is dangerous. This person doesn't deserve a platform." Notice the permanence in that framing. It's not about behavior, it's about essence. It's not, "They did something wrong," it's, "They are wrong." And once dehumanization sets in, empathy becomes nearly impossible. Any defense of the person is met with hostility because defending them means you're not just wrong, you're complicit, you're enabling harm, you're part of the problem. This creates a social environment where nuance dies, where complexity is seen as weakness, where fear drives silence. Stage 5. The erasure. The final stage is elimination. The person loses their platform, their livelihood, their social connections. In extreme cases, they lose their identity. They're not just criticized, they're removed from public life entirely. Some people call this accountability. And sometimes, in cases of genuine harm, removal is necessary. But here's what the pattern reveals. The intensity of the erasure rarely matches the severity of the original transgression. That's because the erasure isn't really about the person anymore. It's about the group. Research on in-group dynamics shows that public punishments serve a social bonding function. When a group collectively rejects someone, it strengthens the group's identity. It clarifies boundaries. It signals shared values. The person being canceled becomes a sacrificial offering to the tribe's cohesion. This is why cancel campaigns often feel so excessive, so disproportionate. The response isn't calibrated to the offense, it's calibrated to the emotional needs of the group. And those needs are deep. The need for control in a chaotic world, the need for moral certainty, the need to believe we're on the right side. So what's really happening beneath the surface? Why does this pattern feel so inevitable, so automatic? First, there's the negativity bias. Our brains are hardwired to pay more attention to negative information than positive information. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Our ancestors who ignored potential threats didn't survive to pass on their genes. So we inherited brains that prioritize danger, that scan for problems, that remember insults more vividly than compliments. When a public figure's flaw is exposed, it doesn't just add to our overall assessment of them, it overwhelms everything else. Research shows that negative information carries roughly 5 times the psychological weight of positive information. One accusation can erase years of good work, not because the accusation is necessarily more significant, but because our brains are wired to overweight it. Second, there's group conformity. The famous Asch conformity experiments demonstrated that people will deny the evidence of their own senses if the group disagrees. We're social animals. Our survival has always depended on staying aligned with our tribe. So when the group moves in one direction, even if that direction feels wrong, most individuals will follow. In cancel culture contexts, this manifests as silence. Even people who privately disagree with the mob's intensity stay quiet because speaking up means risking their own social standing. Studies on groupthink show that dissent becomes psychologically costly when the group is emotionally charged. It's easier, safer, and less painful to go along. Third, there's the fundamental attribution error. When judging others, we attribute their behavior to their character rather than their circumstances. When judging ourselves, we do the opposite. If we make a mistake, it's because we were tired, stressed, misinformed. If someone else makes a mistake, it's because they're a bad person. This bias is everywhere in cancel culture. The person being canceled doesn't get the benefit of context, complexity, or growth. Their action is seen as a revelation of their true nature. Meanwhile, those doing the canceling see themselves as responding appropriately to clear evidence of wrongdoing. Both groups are engaging in the same psychological process, just aimed in different directions. Finally, there's moral grandstanding, the phenomenon where people express moral outrage not because they feel it most intensely, but because public displays of outrage offer social rewards. Research shows that moral outrage on social media is often performative, designed to signal virtue to an audience rather than to enact meaningful change. This doesn't mean the outrage is fake. Emotions can be genuine even when they're also strategic. But it does mean that much of what drives cancel culture isn't about the target at all. It's about the performer's need to be seen as morally correct, socially aware, and aligned with the right values. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This pattern repeats because it serves psychological needs that never go away. Humans need order. We need to believe the world is just, that good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. This is called the just world hypothesis, and it's incredibly persistent even when reality contradicts it. Cancel culture provides a sense of justice in a world that often feels unjust. It offers the illusion of control. Humans need belonging. We're tribal creatures. Participating in collective action, even destructive collective action, creates a sense of unity and purpose. Research on shared emotions shows that groups who experience intense feelings together form stronger bonds. Cancel campaigns create emotional intimacy through shared outrage. Humans need simplicity. The world is complex, morally ambiguous, and exhausting to navigate. Cancel culture offers clear villains and clear heroes. It provides moral clarity in an age of moral confusion. Even when that clarity is false, it feels better than uncertainty. And perhaps most importantly, humans need to externalize their shadow. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the shadow self, the parts of ourselves we find unacceptable and therefore project onto others. When we cancel someone, we're often attacking qualities we fear in ourselves. The rage isn't really about them, it's about us. This is why the pattern is so hard to break. It's not just about behavior, it's about meeting fundamental psychological needs. Until we develop healthier ways to meet those needs, the cycle will continue. So how do you step outside this loop? How do you recognize when you're participating in the pattern? First, notice the speed of your certainty. When you feel immediately, absolutely certain that someone deserves to be destroyed, pause. That certainty is often a red flag. Complex situations rarely warrant instant moral clarity. If you find yourself thinking, this person is irredeemable, within minutes of learning about something, your emotional brain is driving, not your analytical one. Second, check for dehumanizing language in your thoughts. If you're thinking or saying things like, they're garbage, they're trash, they don't deserve to exist, stop. That's not analysis. That's dehumanization. And dehumanization is always a warning sign that you've left the realm of justice and entered the realm of tribalism. Third, ask yourself what you're gaining. This is uncomfortable but necessary. Are you participating in this because you genuinely believe it will reduce harm? Or are you participating because it feels good to be on the right side, to signal your values, to belong to the group? Both can be true simultaneously, but only one is about the target. The other is about you. Fourth, look for proportionality. Does the response match the offense? If someone made an insensitive joke 10 years ago and people are calling for them to lose everything, the punishment has exceeded the crime. That's usually a sign the campaign is no longer about accountability, it's about something else. Fifth, notice who benefits. Cancel campaigns often have hidden beneficiaries, competitors, political opponents, people with personal grievances. If you follow the pattern closely, you'll sometimes discover that the outrage is being amplified by people who have strategic reasons to want the target removed. This doesn't mean the target is innocent, but it does mean you're being used. Sixth, extend the empathy test. Imagine the target is someone you love. Would you still believe they deserve the same treatment? If the answer is no, you're not applying consistent ethical standards. You're applying tribal ones. Finally, remember that broken systems don't create good outcomes through bad processes. Even if someone has genuinely caused harm, mob justice doesn't heal that harm. It just creates different harm. Real accountability involves repair, growth, and sometimes consequences, but it doesn't involve dehumanization and erasure. None of this means excusing genuinely harmful behavior. Some actions do warrant serious consequences. But there's a difference between accountability and annihilation. And if you can't tell the difference anymore, the pattern has already captured you. We opened with a simple observation. The people who destroy you are often the same ones who built you up. Now you understand why. The pattern of cancellation isn't about the individual. It never was. It's about the psychology of elevation and fall, idealization and betrayal, belonging and exclusion. It's about ancient emotional circuitry trying to navigate a modern world it wasn't designed for. Every time you watch someone rise and fall in public consciousness, you're watching this pattern play out in real time. Every time you feel the pull to join the crowd, either in celebration or condemnation, you're feeling the force of psychological loops that have shaped human behavior for thousands of years. The question isn't whether these patterns exist. They do. They always have. The question is whether you can see them clearly enough to choose differently. Because once you recognize the pattern, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you're no longer quite as vulnerable to its pull. The cycle continues. But you don't have to continue with it.